That's kind, Brian, that's kind of sad. You have to shake it so its head won't fall.
We spent some time talking about the Passion. And in particular, how many of you guys know very much about the Shroud of Turin? What? The Shroud of Turin. Does anybody not know what the Shroud of Turin is? Or never heard of it before? All right, cool. All right, so the Shroud of Turin is believed to be the burial shroud of Christ.
Wait, is that Shroud of Turin? I thought the Shroud of Turin was the cloth.
No.
That's the very corner.
So what is that? What's that very
corner? They translated it from
No, the Shroud of Turin is supposedly the burial shroud of Christ. I say supposedly because he is silent. Okay, there was no picture of him being wrapped in it. So we have to kind of go on what the historical record was. And for a large period of time, we don't know where it was. Because, it would be in this particular city, knights would sack the city, they'd take it back to where they were, it would be like 300 years later, they'd find it again. So there's no, pictures of it along the way. So a lot of scientists have been trying to disprove it. I don't know, can you really see very much? I mean, what they did was they laid his body on half of it and then folded the other half over it. So it looks like a big image of two men's bodies kind of pointing this way, the same body. Okay, so what they found was it's actually a photographic negative on linen cloth. They figured this out because back when before it was digital cameras, everything was based on film. So you would take a picture of something and it would create a negative. And then you have to develop the negative, and then the regular image would come out. So the photographer back in the 1800s took a picture of it, and when he took the negative to go get it developed, he looked at it, and this is what he saw. The negative is the actual image. So in other words, the shroud itself is a photographic negative on linen cloth back 2,000 years ago. So the question is, what could cause a photographic negative on linen cloth 2,000 years ago? And basically, they think it was 34 trillion watts of light at the resurrection. That's what they think. John Paul II said that this is the greatest relic in Christian history. And he was brilliant and a mystic. 2,000 scientists have studied the shroud for a total of 600,000 hours of study. NASA's best, the best criminologists around the world. This is literally the most studied artifact on the planet. And 95% of all the scientists who've studied it have converted to Christianity. Whether they were atheists, agnostics, Jewish, whatever they were, they converted to Christianity after studying this. What you see on the shroud is literally all the elements of the Passion. What's really amazing about it, they looked at it, we can't actually tell what it is, but we can tell what it's not. There's no paint, there's no brush marks, there's no direction of strokes or anything like that. It's actually, the linen cloth itself is, it's so priceless of a quality that Cleopatra's burial shroud was nowhere near as good as the quality of this one. Like the linen, even the type of weave, they don't even know how to do anymore. It's just, for the ancient world, this was amazing that you would even have it. When you look at the markings on the shroud, they're actual scorch marks, but they're so small, each scorch mark is the thickness of a human hair, and no deeper than the thickness of the human hair laid on its side. For anyone in the ancient world to try to, even in the medieval times, because some scientists are trying to disprove it, saying, no, it's a medieval forgery, you would have to basically have an instrument far enough away so you could see the image as you were making it. So you would basically need a human hair 10 feet long, burning on one end, and touch it about 1,000,000 times to try to recreate this image. And you couldn't do it, because anytime you create a burn, it's going to go deeper than the depth of a human hand. It's just, they've been trying to recreate it, and they can't. It's a photographic negative, and it has actual human blood on it. Okay? The cool thing about the human blood being on it is that in order for any human blood to be on it still, or even in the first place, the person would have had to have been wrapped in an hour and a half of time. Otherwise, the blood would have dried, and it wouldn't have adhered the way it did to the shroud. Okay? Now, the other thing is, there's no evidence of it drying to the body and then pulling it off. Because if it dried to the body and then you pulled it off, it would tear, it would kind of break, it would smear, right? It was never pulled off of the body. So what they think is actually, when the resurrection happened, he came through the cloth. His resurrected body came right through the cloth, leaving everything untouched. You were going to ask what?
Josh was going to ask first. So.
Does that blood match up with the Eucharist that way?
Good question. Good question. There's been about 140 approved Eucharistic miracles. They've all been tested. This is Father Landry wrote an article about this. You can actually Google Father Landry Eucharistic miracles if you want, and you can read the whole article. There's been 140 Eucharistic miracles approved by the Church. Every single one of them tests out to have the blood type AB. Even ones that have just happened, within the past 50 years. The blood on this matches AB. Now, what's interesting about that is less than 4% of all the people alive have AB blood. So for 140 Eucharistic miracles and the Shroud of Turin to all match AB when less than 4% of people have it, you can't really, the statistics of that all happening are very, 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 very. Jesus had AB blood. He had a blood type. He had DNA. And it's on the Shroud of Turin. We know from the Shroud that it was a Jewish man because the way he wore his hair was the way that Jewish religious men wore their hair. He's about 5'11", almost 6 feet tall, and on the Shroud he weighs between 175 and 180 pounds. After all the massive blood loss during the Passion, so he would have been close to 190, 195. 5'11", 6 feet tall. He was an imposing figure, especially for the time period. Which matches what we know about him. His job was a tecton. He would cut down trees, hew it into logs, throw it on his shoulder, walk it to the work site, make it into a beam. He was a construction worker and a carpenter and a woodworker all in one for a decade and a half of his life, right? He would have been a strong person. I mean, how many people could walk up to fish? How many of you know commercial fishermen? They're not soft guys. You're talking hardened guys. And he could walk up to commercial fishermen, look at them and say, "Follow me." And they look, okay. I mean, he was an imposing figure. He wasn't. It's very similar art today. You can see elements of the Passion on his body. You can see all the scourge marks. You can see the nail marks. You can see the wound on his side. But it's also an X-ray. You can see bone structure. You can see where the nail passed through and which bones in the wrist it passed between. You can even see his teeth structure. It's actually almost like a 3D image of the man on the Shroud. When we talk about what could possibly make this, right? What can make a 3D, what could make a photographic negative on something solid? We actually have evidence of that happening in history before. World War II, when the United States dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima. When they went in to check the evidence later, there were photographic negatives of people on buildings, on the sides of buildings, from the flash of radiation. So It's not a surprise that this could happen. There's a scientific evidence for what caused this. It's just how would a nuclear blast happen in the year 33 AD? Hour of the resurrection. So NASA has been studying this a lot. And they have a camera that can take a picture of space and turn it into a 3D image. If you could take a picture of a picture or painting or anything with this camera, it just turn out blurred and flat. It doesn't pull anything out, except the shroud. It actually pulls out a three-dimensional image. So it was actually, they can prove that it was taken while it was laying over a three-dimensional image. Okay. Now let's kind of tie it in with the actual Passion of the Christ. How many people have seen the movie? Have you ever seen the movie? Sort of, kind of, a little bit? Snippets? Okay. I'm not tying it to the movie. I'm just showing a couple of pictures from the movie. In the actual Passion. So the first part of the Passion, obviously, Jesus' agony in the garden, right? The Gospel says that he sweat blood when he was in the garden. Did you know that there's an actual medical condition where that happens? It's called hematidrosis. It's an actual medical condition. And what causes it is severe emotional and mental anguish. It's extremely rare. But what our faith tells us is that when Jesus was in the garden, he begged the Father to take this cup from him, right? But not my will, but your will be done. What Jesus saw at that moment was every sin ever committed from Adam to the end of time. Okay? He not only saw, think of the most horrible things you can think of. Think of all the different war crimes just in our century alone. Think of the most horrible things you can think of committed against women and children. Think about every abortion that's happened since 1973. He not only saw all of these sins, he felt all of these sins. He literally took them on himself. And what happens with hematidrosis is the anguish is so severe your capillaries explode. Your heart almost explodes. Take it.
Sorry, I do at church.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's cool. I didn't even see you sneak in there.
Very quiet.
So his capillaries exploded, his heart almost exploded. And what happens with this is your entire body basically becomes like a third-degree sunburn. Have you ever had a really bad sunburn and somebody comes up behind you and they slap you on the back? Oh, right? His whole body became a third-degree sunburn from this before the Passion. Okay? You can just put that in perspective. So why does the church ask us to think about this every year? The church asks us to think about this every year, to bring up the emotion for you, right? And link it to what he did for you. Because the Passion isn't just something that happened 2,000 years ago. It is a historical event. It did happen. But remember, he said, whatever you did to the least of these, you did it to me. The sins that we do now, he felt then. All through time to the end of time. These people who aren't even born yet, whatever they're going to commit later in their life, he felt all that now. So, if we can think about that at some point later tonight, when you're at home, about how personal sin is. Okay, then the scourging. The evidence on the shroud shows what the scourging was done with. It was a Roman flagrum. They actually have all the marks from a flagrum. So you have the two or three cords with balls and bone and hooks. So when it would hit him, it would swell, the hooks would grab, and then they would tear back. This is the actual evidence on the shroud. They can actually take flagrums and lay them over the images, and it matches perfectly. It also matches that he had one on each side. It matches that he would have been standing at a pillar about at waist high. Because the way the lashes came in, some went up, some went sideways, some went down. So he was standing and they had one on each side. And the pillar that he was believed to have been scourged on is still there, and it is waist high. It also shows that one soldier was kind of going through the motions. He was there and he had to do it, but he didn't put much effort into it. The one on the other side, it basically went in a rage. He was, from his side, it was way more severe, way more intense. The one on one side got him on the back, top back, lower back, and abdomen, and some on the chest. The other one got him on the neck, all the way down the legs, front and back of the legs, arms, and heavily in the center. He was lashed 120 times. Jewish law was 39. You couldn't lash anyone over 39 times. He was lashed 120.
What's wrong with him? Was there any?
There's no limit. So they went into a rage. They said that they had some of the best forensics, like the CSI guys, the criminologists, some of the best forensics and criminologists studied all this. And they said that he would have been standing in about a 5-foot circle all around his body of just his own blood and skin. So the movie is actually very accurate to what the Shroud says. There would have been no coming back from this. I remember even the movie when he comes back out like this, and Herod looks at him. Herod just he looks at his head guy and he says, basically, I didn't tell you to kill him. The human body wouldn't have come back from this. Just the shock and blood loss alone. There was no going back. Which also, like, Herod was surprised that Jesus only lived for 3 hours on the cross. Some people can live for days. But people weren't scourged like this. This wasn't common practice. The blood loss alone is the miracle he even got to the cross. The crowning with thorns. Remember that picture I showed earlier of the two faces, and it actually shows blood on it? They have at least 15 very deep puncture marks, and it's all over the head. So it would have been a cap of thorns, not just the artistic crown. And there's actually flowers, images of flowers on the shroud that were picked up from the radiation blast. And some of them are the flowers of this particular thorn. It's called the Gardelia thorn, the Jewish long thorn. They could be anywhere from 2 to 4 inches long. And carpenters would go after these if they ran out of nails. They would take the 4-inch ones, and you could actually use them in carpentry. That's how hard they were. And when they beat it into his head with the reed, the forensics say that it actually started to penetrate the bone in his skull. Not through, but into the bone. He would have had the most massive migraine in human history. Now, what some saints have said when they look back on this image of the crowning with thorns and then how they mocked him and mocked his kingship. When you go home and you have a little time to think on your own, we've all done it in our lives. When have we mocked his kingship? When have we not stood up for him? Right? Out in public, right? When you're at school, on a sports team, somebody makes an offhanded comment about the Catholic faith, right? Someone makes an offhanded comment about Christ, uses his name in vain in front of you. I mean, you don't have to go right up to him and say, hey, but you can make a comment, you can say something. You can say, hey, it has nothing to do with him, or just even make a sign of the cross or something silent, but we have to make some atonement for him. We have to make some reparation for his kingship being mocked. He did say that if you acknowledge me before men, I'll acknowledge you before my Father. If you deny me before men, I will deny you before my Father. That meant something. And if everything that we've done in our lives reflect back and he felt it at that moment, it's personal, right? times that I should have said more, I should have said something, and I didn't. It's simply very moving. The carrying of the cross, what's interesting is there were two different ways that the Romans would make people carry the cross to the site of execution. Some of them was they had to carry the whole cross, which would have weighed about 400 pounds. And after what he went through in the scourging, there's no way he would have carried a 400-pound cross. I mean, the guy could, it was like less than half a mile to get to Golgotha, and he barely made it. I mean, there's no way he could have carried a 400-pound cross, half a mile. What's interesting is on the shroud, this is from a different movie. I actually really don't like the movie, but I like the picture, just for the image. They would have the, just the cross piece, and they would put it over your shoulders and tie your wrists to it. So you couldn't take your arms down. You basically carried it like that the whole way. Now, what would happen if you tripped?
Face first.
Or if they kicked you, spit on you, kicked you, whipped you. Yeah, the actual Shroud of Turin, the knees on the shroud are really ripped up. And remember, because of the radiation, it picks up other things, not just the blood and the tissue. There's stone and dirt in his lips, in his chin. His nose, the bridge of his nose is badly scraped off. And there's dirt and stone in that too. So when he fell face first. Knees hit first, and then boom, face right in the dirt. Nothing to put his knees in. The crucifixion. What evidence is there on the shroud of the crucifixion? We know where the nails went through, and it wasn't his hands. It wouldn't make sense. It would just tear right out. There's nothing to stop it. So the Romans actually studied this very well. They were really, really good at torturing people. They actually studied this. If you take your hand, guys, try it. Just take your hand, look down your wrist. If you go back and forth, there's like a little hollow that you find, like right around there. Right? They were really good at finding that, putting the nail through it, for two reasons. One, it can't just tear out, right? The wrist bones will stop it. It doesn't break any bones, it just wedges right through the wrist bones. And there's a major nerve that passes through there called the median nerve. The median nerve is very thick. It runs basically from your wrist all the way to the base of your skull. Brachial plexuses and stuff like that. But yeah, anyway, one big nerve all the way up. And they found that if you put it there and you half sever that nerve, it's an explosion of pain from your arm all the way up to your head. And then they hang them from those nerves. It's unimaginable. Now imagine you're on the beach and you're walking along and you step on a nail and it comes right up through your foot. Right? Imagine if that nail came up through both feet and you had to stand on it for 3 hours. Not only that, when you're on the cross, your arms are up like this, right? You're in a permanent inhale. You can't breathe out. So in order to breathe out, he would have had to push up on his feet, pull up on his arms, pull up on his median nerves that he's hanging from, scrape your back up the cross just to breathe. Now remember, the whole bloody sweat, sunburn, no skin on your back, for 3 hours, up and down on the cross. It makes the last 7 sayings of Christ pretty important, doesn't it? If he had to go through that just to breathe, and there were 7 sayings that he took the time to say, they're pretty important. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Woman, behold your son. Son, behold your mother. This day you will be living in paradise. Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. They can actually, because of the way the blood dripped and started to dry, it matches the positions he would have had to have been in to breathe, and then when he would hang again, and when he would come up to breathe. And they can actually predict the position that he died in by the shroud. Remember, supposedly one shoulder got dislocated during the process when they were nailing him to the cross. So they can predict that, and an artist had done this based on it, but this is the position they think he died in. then this, I like this picture. This isn't from the Shroud, obviously, but I really like this picture. This is from the movie, The Passion of the Christ. It's actually the final scene when he's taken down from the cross. And what they do is for anyone who hasn't seen it, they pan back away from Mary, and it is her eyes just lock on the person who's watching the movie, and the expression on her face is just, she's not angry, she's not accusing, but she's got one hand kind of gesturing towards you, and the look on her face is just, what now? What are you going to do with this? Right? And this is a point that I try to work into different talks throughout the years, and even my conversations with my own kids, is that our faith isn't an idea. Right? It's not a theory. It's not an idea. It's not a belief. Right? It's extremely personal. It's extremely personal. Remember I said when you make the sign of the cross, you should think in your head, every time you make the sign of the cross, you should think one word, you should think Christ saying, mine. Because this is your price tag, right? This is your worth. If that's what it took for you to be able to have eternal life, things have to change even in our own thinking. It's everything. Sin is not something impersonal. There was somebody that I heard giving a passion talk once, and he went through the whole scourging, and he went into a lot of detail, and then he stepped back and he said, take a look at that. Is that what you pictured sin to be? Did you think it was clean? Did you think it was neat and tidy? Did you think it was something secret, something hidden? Right? So anyway, I love that picture where she's handing back and she's just saying, okay, what do you do now? And this is what Lent is supposed to do for us. Lent is supposed to go by, and it brings up the emotion because it should bring up the emotion, because it's personal. And there's only one response that's fitting for this, and it should be love. Right? So we examine our lives and we say, what proof do we have in our lives that we are responding to this? So, and every Lent, I have to do the same thing too. So, last time I challenged you guys to read a gospel, even one gospel from the beginning to the end. If you weren't able to do it, try it again. Okay? Just try. Just pick one. Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John. Start from the beginning. Try reading it. And if anybody can watch the Passion of the Christ, as long as you can handle it, because it is this, and it doesn't pull any punches, watch it. Because you don't need to hide from it. So, where do you go from there? I hope you guys can take some time to think about some of these things. They talk about and scientists try to say that this was a forgery in the Middle Ages. They actually couldn't have forged it. They found some things. The forensic scientists, CSI guys, actually found that around all the wounds, it's not just blood. There's serum, but you can't see serum. You can only see it with ultraviolet light. There was no ultraviolet light in the Middle Ages. So how could they have forged something invisible that they didn't even know existed without the technology to do it? Can't do it. They found, in the image, he has coins on his eyes. It was a Jewish custom to put coins over the eyes when you buried somebody. The technology that they have now for fingerprinting, like in CSI, how they can take your they can find fingerprints, they scan it into a computer, and it matches it against others in the database, and the computer overlays them, and whichever ones generate the most matches, they think was the perpetrator. They did that with a database of ancient coins that they have, and it actually matches up with a coin that was minted under Tiberius Caesar in the year 29 AD. So it's just pretty wild, some of the things on there. Even the lance wound, the dimensions of the wound match exactly the dimensions of a Roman lance wound. And where it went through, because it's an X-ray quality, it went in through the 5th and 6th rib. Okay, why is that important? When someone's been tortured horrendously, what happens to their body is that the sac around the heart, the pericardium, fills with fluid. And it actually is crushing the heart. Jesus didn't die. Most people on the cross died of suffocation because they just couldn't breathe anymore. Jesus didn't die of suffocation. The best criminal forensics guys said that he died of heart failure on the cross, which matches the gospel. Jesus gave up his own spirit, and his heart just stopped. Nobody took his life from him. He gave up his spirit. Right? In the gospel accounts, at one point they wanted to throw him off of the cliff. He walked right through him, because his time had not yet come. There were different times they wanted to kill him, but his time had not yet come. They couldn't touch him. Even when he died, he did it on his account, on his own accord. He gave up his spirit when he was ready. Wild. And when the lance went through and pulled out, that's why blood and water came out from the side. Because it went through the pericardium, the fluid started coming out, and then the blood followed. So you had two streams coming out. Does forensics match the gospel? It's really wild. That was kind of long. Any questions or thoughts or noises or?
I'm gonna sit down tonight.
And that's what's happening. What? Yeah.
So I don't know what you guys want to do if you want to.
I mean, like, I don't know. She said, like, at the end of the scene, I wasn't sure what that
I have
was.
6 dodgeballs.
Like, how they couldn't fake it. What? Maybe. Like, how